3 minutes after 10 is the time. I'm just sort of dividing the world into two. Is it 52%, 48%? I was listening to Nick's last caller there, and a text just dropped in saying, well, why do some people always want the world to be worse for other people and not better? I think that's probably a divide, isn't it, in our population? And there's a divide among politicians. The difference between politicians who do what they have to do because they've been left with no choice, even though they don't want to do it, and politicians who do what they want to do because they've got an ideology, whether you approve of it or not. They're two very different types of politicians. Today, Boris Johnson will apologise. He really doesn't want to. He's apologising because, as ever with Boris Johnson, that is the final option he has left. The alternative would be to act honourably and resign, as any other Prime Minister at any other point in British history, with a catalogue of calumnies and corruption that Boris Johnson now has on his Prime Ministerial CV, would clearly have done. So he will apologise. He won't mean it. He won't be doing it because he wants to do it. He'll be doing it because that is the only option left. It will be an evasion. It will be a postponement. It will be another attempt to avoid consequences, undertaken only because the only other choice would be to act honourably. And he can never, ever do that. And then we'll get an announcement later this week about a package of financial aid for the poorest people in the country, which again, if it wasn't for the horrors of the Sue Gray report shortly to be published, they wouldn't be doing that either. They don't want to help the poorest people in the country. They want to give them patronising lectures about value food and cookery lessons and the ease with which you could get a better paid job or work more hours. They don't want to help these people. They told Keir Starmer last week at Prime Minister's Questions Times that they don't want to help these people. They don't want to put a windfall tax on energy companies because the idea of taking money from the pockets of super wealthy shareholders and putting it into the pockets of people who can't feed their children is anathema to these people. It disgusts them. The very thought that anybody might not deserve to be living in obscene poverty opens the door to the possibility that people like Rishi Sunak, who paid £10,000 of his own money the other day to take a helicopter to a Conservative fundraiser, might somehow not deserve to be obscenely rich. So we are now governed entirely by necessity, by politicians who make announcements and policies on the hoof designed solely to postpone reality and justice. They don't want to do any of these things. They don't want to bring in a windfall tax. They don't want to help people pay their bills. They don't want to apologise. They don't want to take responsibility for the actions in Downing Street while the rest of us were unable to attend funerals. They don't want to do any of that. But this week they'll do it. And all of the most deluded and obsequious sycophants in the history of British politics and British media will pretend that they approve, or that it's been done for noble reasons, or that we should draw a line under it now and move on. And we, those of us who can see through it, like a window, we will sit here with a shared sense of wonder and disgust and once again ask ourselves, what will it take to bring this cavalcade of corruption to an end? And then we'll smile wryly and engulf each other in warm hugs and concede that we still don't know. 7 minutes after 10 is the time. Theo Usherwood, I think, deserves an early summons today. And here he is. I think we need a timetable, don't we? We need a rough idea, and I appreciate nothing is certain yet, but a rough idea of what transpires from here on in.
We've already had an early bit of drama because, of course, Sue Gray was meant to, this was the hope within Number 10, send her report early, we're talking 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, to Number 10 so that they could prepare their apologies. They're going to be making 3 apologies today. However, it still hasn't arrived in Number 10, so they still haven't been able to prepare, and that is causing frustration.
They used Hermes to deliver it, did they?
It was only across the way. He's only across the way. You could just walk.
Might be in the neighbour's bin. Might be in Rishi Sunak's bin with a little note put through the letterbox.
It's still not there, and that's causing some frustration, should we put it that way, in Number 10. But it's going to be there very shortly. Boris Johnson and his team will then go through exactly the most difficult bits, how they're going to structure their answers to difficult questions at PMQs, and then the statement in the House of Commons, which will come, we think at the moment at least, at 12:30, immediately following Prime Minister's questions. We're then expecting a press conference mid-afternoon, sometime around 3:30.
Will that be like the sort of Jonathan Van Tam style ones? It'll be in that room with the.
It'll be in the
lectern
room. It'll be in the 2.6
million.
million.
Will you be in the room where it happens, or will Ben Kentish be on duty by then?
Ben and I will divvy it up. I suspect it will be Ben. But you'll then have the press conference, and then you will have at 5 o'clock the meeting, which is behind closed doors, which is a meeting of the Conservative backbenchers of the 1922 committee. And whilst, of course, we're all going to be looking at what the PM has to say to the House of Commons and at the press conference, in terms of the Prime Minister's his future and whether, and we're expecting at the moment for Conservative MPs to continue to endorse him as their leader, we're expecting the most important meeting is perhaps that 1922 committee, because if the course of the day goes badly wrong for the Prime Minister, then we could end up in a situation. I'm saying I think this is an outside chance at the moment. I think most Conservative MPs have made up their minds, and the majority have made up their minds that they're going to stick with him.
This is quite interesting because that would include ones who were pretty close to adamant that if he was found to have broken the law, they would want him to go. So as we discussed at the time, and I'll take the credit for this one, the postponements always are designed to dilute the anger. If he can, it's the same as he treated his wives and his mistresses. The longer you can keep in the house, the more likely it is that you won't get thrown out of the house.
I think something else is going on, James. I think Boris Johnson has always polled better than the Conservative Party itself. He is seen as in the same, you could put him in the same ranks in terms of popularity, certainly at the 2019 general election, as somebody like Margaret Thatcher. And nobody has come forward to say that they want to take on the role of being Prime Minister that Conservative MPs can get behind. And it could be said that he is, to an extent, protected by the cost of living crisis, because to be a Prime Minister, you have to have a sense of ego. You've got to have a sense that actually you want to take on the job. Who would want to take on the job when you've got 18 months, 2 years left of it, and you've got inflation going to be hitting double figures by the end of the year? Energy price cap nearing £3,000 a year, and people are going to be struggling, and you have got to do the impossible in terms of trying to win the next election. And there's nobody in the Conservative Party who has that same electoral cachet as Boris Johnson. He knows it, they know it, Conservative MPs know it, and therefore that, I think, is really the reason why he's safe. Because who's going to take it on?
It's cynical. So Ukraine came to his rescue, the cost of living comes to his rescue because...
who wants to take it on?
A less egotistical politician wouldn't want to take it on.
Because
but a man who cares not about what he will do when he is in the office, but only about having his name on the door of the office, is the only man for the job at a time like this.
Who would want to step forward right now, challenge the Prime Minister, and it would take resignations within his cabinet, challenge the Prime Minister, win that vote, become Prime Minister, and then in 2 years' time,
preside
off the
over
backdrop,
the horrors of the next 2 years,
and lose to Keir Starmer, potentially.
In conclusion, what time do you think you will get hold of it?
We're looking at some time, I think, around just before Prime Minister's questions. It's going to be very tight because Sue Gray's the way she's making her decisions is pushing things back a bit.
And NPMQs, which you'll be back in the office, back in the studio for that.
And as soon as if I get it before then, I'll pop back.
And then after that, we sit tight and wait and see what happens at the press conference and later in the day at the 1922 committee.
That's the crucial one.
Keep your radio locked to LBC as the dream team get their teeth into one of the most significant political stories of our age. And if there's any doubt about how significant it is, and it is... let me just give you a little example. It's going to be a weird show today. You're going to have to remind me that it's a phone-in. It's one of those mornings where I've got quite a lot to get off my chest. Let me give you a little example of just how dissembling British newspapers can be in their desperate attempts to pretend that this is not a major story. The Daily Mail, for example, 2 weeks of Beer Starmer's Currygate story on the front of their newspaper. 2 whole weeks, and they haven't put this on the front page for 2 days. It's objectively incredible. On Monday, they ran an untruth that they had been spoon-fed by Downing Street about who had instigated the report in which Boris Johnson allegedly sought to persuade Sue Gray not even to bother publishing her report. Listen to this from the Daily Telegraph today. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. The comment pages of the Daily Telegraph, they commission more comedy than Netflix. But the news pages are sound. The Mayor of London has invoked legal powers to demand the Met Police explain why the Prime Minister was not fined for attending an alcohol-fueled leaving party in Downing Street. Sadiq Khan has written to Acting Commissioner Sir Stephen House, using powers granted to all police and crime commissioners, requesting urgent answers about Scotland Yard's handling of the Partygate investigation. investigation, excuse me. Right, you got that, right? That's the Daily Telegraph. The newspaper which is to Boris Johnson as the Beano is to Dennis the Menace. You go to the increasingly crackerjack Daily Mail and you have a headline, Khan's completely inappropriate meddling piles pressure on Met. How can that be? The Daily Telegraph tell us, and I'll use this phrase advisedly, using powers granted to all police and crime commissioners. That's reality. Put it through the distorting lens of Paul Dacre's Daily Mail and it becomes Khan's completely inappropriate meddling piles pressure on Met. And that's how desperate these people are to pretend that their hero and their Brexit is not an absolute clown car. And today you'll see this perhaps ramped up to yet another degree. So I think what we'll do, as we wait for the Partygate report, as we wait for Sue Gray's report, we'll focus on what we already know. We'll focus on what perhaps has emerged since yesterday, and we'll focus upon how it makes us feel. That's all. Because much as I pity people who were angry about this, but now pretend not to be, or whose anger has dissipated, the point is not about cake or Prosecco or broken swings or speeches and toasts and glasses and canapes. The point is about probity and integrity, honour and decency, and there isn't any left. And I appreciate that there may still be some pleasure in the discombobulation that phenomenon visits upon the rest of us. You may still be able to derive some pleasure from how upset the other side are, but we're upset by things that everybody should be upset by. We're upset by contempt for the law, contempt for common decency, contempt for the notion that consequences follow actions, that wrongdoing should be punished. We're upset with the corruption in the heart of our government, and it all comes from one man. The fish rots from the head down. So after the interlude, the looming interlude, I'll just run through some of the facts as we know them, some of the contradictions between words that have come out of Boris Johnson's mouth 6 months ago and words that have come out more recently, or words that came out on Monday from his own office and words that came out later on Monday completely contradicting them. And then we'll just try, and it may be wrong, and you may want to come at it from a different angle, in which case we will, then we'll just try and focus exclusively upon the now absolutely irrefutable knowledge that Downing Street was like a holiday camp when the rest of us were enduring the worst privations of lockdown. That's what I want to focus on. The simple fact that the postcode, the buildings that were the scene of law-making were also the site of more law-breaking than any other buildings in the country. Because I get it. I know why you have to pretend you don't care, but you have to defend it, and you can weasel some words to make it not sound so bad, or claim that other people who are cross about this stuff are just as blindly partisan as you are. But you're not just lying to me, lying to your radio. You're lying to yourself. And I hate the fact that he's done that to you. Even though you may not be my biggest fan, I still respect you enough to hate the fact that Boris Johnson has turned you into somebody who now has to lie to themselves. And you're not alone. He's done it to Rishi Sunak. He's done it to Nadhim Zahawi. He's done it to Grant Shapps. He's done it to Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's done it to Nadine Dorries. He's done it to Kwasi Kwarteng. He's done it to Liz Truss. He's done it to Priti Patel. He's done it to every single member of his party that now seeks to defend the indefensible. He has made you do this. He has turned you into somebody that is now lying to yourself. And it's so easy to break out of it. All you've got to do is tell the truth. And that's what we'll do after this. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. And like you, there are days when I wonder, what should they all be doing? These people who still have access to members of the government, what questions should they be asking? How should they be conducting themselves? I don't know if you saw Panorama last night, which inexplicably segued sort of 15 minutes from the end into an attempt to pretend that there was some sort of equivalence or balance between what Boris Johnson has done and what Keir Starmer has been accused of. I've said it to you before and I'll say it again. It's a pathetic attempt to retain access to people who have really squandered any claim to respectability or decency long ago. And yes, I do get cross with some of the journalists involved, but I also recognise that they have to do what they do. Very, very hard to get anywhere in the British media without retaining access to senior politicians. The alternative, of course, is to end up being having them calling for you to be sacked from your job while simultaneously claiming to defend freedom of speech. So when I saw Sam Coates from Sky News outside Downing Street last night, I felt a warm surge of relief.
Did you lie at the dispatch box, Prime Minister? Why did you try and stop Sue Gray publishing her report, Prime Minister? Would you defend anything at all, Grant Shapps? Did Boris Johnson try to squash the Sue Gray report, Anne-Marie Trevelyan? Did you talk about Partygate in Cabinet, or is it easier to hear no evil and see no evil?
Many important matters to discuss.
I bet there are.
Foreign Secretary.
Is Partygate embarrassing on the world stage, Foreign Secretary? Are you being loyal to save your job? Do you think a future Prime Minister would make you Foreign Secretary? Did Boris Johnson lie at the dispatch box, Nadim Zahawi? Or would you prefer to succeed him as Prime Minister? Does Partygate enhance this government's reputation internationally, Oliver Dowden? Are you proud of this government, Sajid Javid? Are you proud of what's been going on inside the building you've just come out of? Did you discuss Partygate in Cabinet, Deputy Prime Minister?
Now, I've played you that, and you won't be surprised to learn there's a strong chance I'll play it to you again, because those are the questions that should be asked in studios. Every single one of those people has been in studios over the last couple of weeks, and those are the questions that people can't ask or won't ask, because either they don't want to embarrass the government that they helped install, in many cases, or indeed expose the Brexit that they helped sell to a population, or they won't ask them because they need for their programmes access to these people next week or next month. And that is, I think, why there's so much frustration in Sam Coates' voice. I don't know Sam, I only professionally, I've never met him, but I recognise the frustration in his voice. How can we be doing this? How can we be conducting business as usual when what is unfolding on the field in front of us is absolutely appalling? And it gets worse and worse. These things don't happen overnight. They're a slow turning up of the dial. You put somebody whose relationship with the truth is completely non-existent in charge of everything, and it infects everybody around him. Eventually, everybody is either shouting in the wilderness like Sam Coates or defending the lies like every single politician he just quizzed. And I don't know what to pick first by way of illustration. I think perhaps we'll probably pick this because it left a woman who had done nothing wrong except get a fit of the giggles in a work environment. She hadn't, as far as we know, attended any parties. She hadn't broken any laws, and her career was left in ruins by Boris Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, I think the right honourable gentleman probably missed what I said at the beginning, but I apologise. I apologise for the impression that has been given that staff in Downing Street take this less than seriously. I'm sickened myself and furious about that.
Sickened and furious about the suggestion that there had been any parties. That, of course, was the first story to break, the one that left Allegra Stratton in tears, offering her resignation and watching her carefully cultivated career disappear down the plug hole of Boris Johnson's betrayal. Quite incredible. Play that one again, please.
Mr. Speaker, I think the right honourable gentleman probably missed what I said at the beginning, but I apologise. I apologise for the impression that has been given that staff in Downing Street take this less than seriously. I'm sickened myself and furious about that.
I'm going to do this on the hoof, all right? The phone lines are open. If you want to ring in and join in, persuade the producers you've got something interesting to say, and we'll just slip it into the programme normally. I'm not doing a normal phone-in at first. I'm just doing... I'm inspired by Sam Coates to do a little bit of public service journalism, because you're sort of thinking to yourself, well, how big a lie was that? How big a hypocrisy was that claim in Parliament, in our sovereign Parliament, all the little flag wavers who pretend to care passionately about the sovereignty of Parliament? That's where he told that absolute lie and watched Allegra Stratton's career disappear over the horizon without a single twinge of guilt or regret, because, of course, it's all about Operation Big Dog. So what's the best contrast to that, or the best illumination of just how hypocritical it was? Probably something actually from last night that did emerge on that Panorama programme before it descended into a ludicrous exercise in self-serving false equivalence. Have a little listen to this, which is a Downing Street worker describing not just the culture of corruption in Downing Street, but also the architect of that corruption.
Lee Kane's leaving do. Can you just tell us what happened at that event?
There was about 30 people, if not more, in a room. Everyone was stood shoulder to shoulder, some people on each other's laps.
People were sitting on each other's laps?
Yes, 1 or 2 people. They were every week. The event invites for Friday press office drinks were just nailed into the diary.
There were actually invites. There was a weekly regular invite to press office drinks on Friday nights.
Yes, Wine Time Fridays. Invites that were in everyone's calendar for every Friday at 4 p.m.
At 4 o'clock in the afternoon was wine time.
Yes.
So to be really clear about this, you and your colleagues felt that you had essentially permission from Boris Johnson to have these events. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because
he was there. He may have just been popping through on the way to his flat because that's what would happen. You know, he wasn't there saying this shouldn't be happening. He wasn't saying, can everyone break up and go home? Can everyone socially distance? Can everyone put masks on? No, he wasn't telling anybody that. He was grabbing a glass for himself. His principal private secretary himself was organising. His staff were organising parties.
They were sitting on each other's knees while we had to attend funerals over Zoom. And they thought it was all okay because the man in charge, ultimately Boris Johnson, and his closest confidants, his key allies and advisors, were the party starters. Little nod there to Prodigy fans. They were the Twisted Fire starters. And then, of course, another example, if you still need another one, which is the one which really is poised to bite him hardest on the backside, because this involves a blatant breach of the ministerial code.
Will the Prime Minister tell the House whether there was a party in Downing Street on the 13th of November?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no, but I'm sure that whatever happened, the guidance was followed and the rules were followed at all times.
And we now know that that was indeed the party that you just heard one of the attendees referring to, Lee Kane's so-called leaving do. Where do you go from there? How much more evidence do you need? How does this pile on? I'll say it again. They were sitting on each other's knees and guffawing at Boris Johnson's party pieces, while the rest of us had to attend funerals over Zoom or couldn't even visit newborn members of our families. But hey, send me more texts about how it's only cake or cheese and doesn't really matter, because I need it. I need the evidence of just how hard you will work to lie to yourself on behalf of a man who would not urinate on you if you were on fire. It's coming up to 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. How do you process the knowledge that then when we were attending funerals over Zoom, when we were denied the barest physical contact with our elderly parents, whether they were in care homes or not, how do you process that knowledge? That they were partying like it was 1999. Another nod there to fans of rather out of date. Although that one will never be out of date, will it? They were partying like it was 1999, and you had to attend funerals of loved ones over Zoom. Holly Harris is here now with your headlines. 37 pages of text has now been delivered to Downing Street. The Prime Minister is reading it. I don't know how many photographs are also included in that, but they are, I'm told, definitely in the package, but not part of the 37 pages. 37 pages of text, exclusive text, and then an undisclosed number of photographs. Continuing with an attempt. Let me read you this, because possibly you think I exaggerate about the efforts people will go to lie to themselves. Here's a chap called Craig. A gathering isn't a party, although I doubt you know what a party is. That's funny because it means I don't go to parties. See? Attending a hospital or funerals during COVID wasn't possible for Boris either. We had drinks at work for our key workers. It was not a party, it was a gathering. You are just a desperate lefty, says Craig, who possibly didn't hear the reports of people sitting on each other's knees when they were supposed to be 2 meters apart, or doesn't understand that if someone who attended that specific party has actually been fined, then Boris Johnson's defence, which Craig is regurgitating without understanding even what the words mean, is both wrong, unsustainable and pathetic. But that's what has to happen now. You have to be Craig if you want to hang on to this. You have to now lie to yourself. And of course, it becomes a little bit easier to lie to yourself if you insult the people who are telling you the truth. So I doubt you know what a party is. That's brilliant. That's genius. Cuts me to the core, because he's right. I've never been to a party in my life. Not like Craig. He's out there all the time. He's one of those guys with a little sort of comedy tie, like a piano, and Homer Simpson socks, and a sign up in the office saying you don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps. Craig is a party starter. He's a life and soul, is old Craig. And I'm just a desperate lefty, you see. That really hurts as well. And it lets Craig lie to himself, because that's told him with his truth and his facts and his absolutely incontrovertible evidence that I am an idiot. So be more Craig, perhaps, is the way to get out of this particular programme. 10:35 is the time. If he does have anyone nearby, perhaps you could teach him how to operate the radio dial, and he could listen to something else. I don't know. But he's probably too busy partying to be able to work it out for himself. And I'll read out a few more of these if they come in, because it is incredible now. But it's not about what the politicians do. It's about what we do. How do we respond to what is unfolding in front of us? Answer by either doing what we do together every day, which is tell the truth and try and make some sense of it, or lie to ourselves. It's no big deal. It doesn't matter. It's biased. It's this, that, or the other. It's all there. And I was thinking about that attitude and what perhaps explains it, what lies behind it. And there was one little comparison this morning that somebody put together that I thought was really quite incredible. It's by a chap called Nick Pettigrew, who's just done it on Twitter. His book Antisocial is a splendid book, actually. It's out in paperback. You should definitely have a look at it. But have a little listen to this. Actually, first of all, let's do another clip first. No, let's do it this way round. No, let's do the clip first. So just have a little listen to this, all right?
Sue Gray's first summary said some staff felt they couldn't complain. And we've heard what happened when a number 10 custodian, a security guard, tried to stop a party in full flow.
I remember when a custodian tried to stop it all, and he was just shaking his head in this party, being like, this shouldn't be happening. People laughed at him. People made fun of him because he was so worked up that this party was happening and it shouldn't be happening.
I remember when a custodian tried to stop it all, and he was just shaking his head in this party, being like, this shouldn't be happening. People made fun of him because he was so worked up that this party was happening and it shouldn't be happening. Okay? Now listen to this, which is a report upon the aftermath of a Bullingdon Club meeting at Oxford University, which features David Cameron was in it, I think George Osborne was in it, Boris Johnson was in it. And it is a dining club for the super privileged, super privileged. It's where the stories came of people burning £50 notes in front of homeless people, trashing pubs and throwing money at the landlord. And Boris Johnson, until quite late in life, would still greet former members of the Bullingdon Club, even as a fully grown adult, with the words "bulla, bulla, bulla," which is a sort of chant designed. Well, you'll see what it was designed to do, because here's a description of an aftermath of a Bullingdon Club meeting. Every piece of furniture that could have been broken was broken. Every liquid sprayed around the room. The panelling was cracked and everything was piled in a heap in the middle of the room. The college door to Magdalen was smashed to pieces. I remember the clerk of works looking at the mess in complete dismay. The college had spent a great deal on the refurbishment. All the students who heard this late-night destruction were terrified, I remember. Bullingdon members found it amusing if people were intimidated or frightened by their behaviour. I remember them walking down a street in Oxford in their tails, chanting "Bulla, Bulla," and smashing bottles along the way just to cow people. All right, just I remember the clerk of works looking at the mess in complete dismay. The college had spent a great deal on the refurbishment. All the students who heard this late-night destruction were terrified, I remember. That's when Boris Johnson was at Oxford. I don't know if he was at that particular party, but he was at plenty. And this is what happened in Downing Street when he was Prime Minister. I remember when a custodian tried to stop it all, and he was just shaking his head in this party, being like, this shouldn't be happening. People made fun of him because he was so worked up that this party was happening and it shouldn't be happening. When people tell you who they are, believe them the first time. It's 10:39. And you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think we'll take a call. I was toying with the idea of trying to do the full hour on just reportage, just facts, footage, clips, evidence, truth. But I suspect that we need to punctuate it a little bit with other people's thoughts and insights. So we'll start with Pete, who's in Bristol. Pete, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning. If I'm honest, I thought you might go for the full hour. We would have enjoyed it.
But you've been on the bench. You'd have been on the bench for the full 90 minutes if that had happened. Go on.
Yeah. I just want to say, people that still say we need to focus on cost of living instead of this party stuff, they are the same thing, okay?
Yes, of course.
These people are corrupt. These people are literally in their workplace doing whatever they want. So... And the other thing you point out is all the newspapers are like keeping them in government. This is just a cycle. They stay in power. They put taxpayers' money into these papers. The papers keep them in power, and it just keeps going around. And they're not doing this so that they have to work hard. They are doing this so they do nothing. So they can just work for themselves, and they can just literally, it's like a 5-year gig. These things intertwine. This corruption is literally incompetence. It leads that way every single time. They're not doing this to work harder.
They feed off each other. There's a wonderful piece in the Times today by Alice Thompson, which talks about how they have been reduced to standing for nothing. We touched upon it yesterday with the Alexander Hamilton quotes, but she describes these people having essentially just to go around like human cat litter, clean. That's my phrase, not hers. Like human cat litter, cleaning up after Boris Johnson, and the idea that they actually stand for something or can go to their constituencies this weekend and tell potential voters what they've done or what was in the Queen's speech that's of substance. There's absolutely nothing there. And what did they brief the newspapers today? Windfall tax within days as PM seeks to throw off Partygate. At least the Telegraph is honest about why they're doing it. Rescue deal for cost of living in days, says the Daily Mail, which is inevitably not remotely honest about why they're doing it. And windfall tax will help fund help for poor families, says the Times. This is after weeks of refusing even to countenance it or possibly postponing it until it would be more politically helpful in the summer. And instead, because they have to, like human cat litter, clean up Boris Johnson's latest mess, policies are now being announced and devised on the hoof in order to distract attention from the absolute corruption at the very heart of Downing Street. I find it absolutely incredible. And it's a great piece. It really is. The Tories seem the most morose, writes Alice Thompson, as they limp along devoid of ideas despite their 80-strong majority, unable even to decide whether it's in their interests to get rid of Boris Johnson. The new intake of voting fodder, working family wrecking hours. They have few mentors to look up to in cabinet. Jacob Rees-Mogg, Priti Patel and Nadine Dorries aren't shining exemplars, and almost no one in the party appears to be showing much moral courage. And that, I would say, is putting it mildly. Colin's in West Hampstead. Colin, what would you like to say?
I'll keep it brief, James. I'm absolutely speechless that somebody like Jacob Rees-Mogg can get away with what he said, and not a lot of people are picking up on it. The fact that...
Which bit? I mean, he said a lot of things.
Well, that simple word, James, I'm sure you know, fluff. It's
right.
all fluff.
Of course.
You know, honestly... You see these people that have died in hospitals. We know the stories. Everybody knows the stories about catastrophic incidents where people haven't been able to see their children when they're dying, when they haven't been able to see adults when they're dying. You know, it goes on and on, James. And for that, well, best not say that word. For that man to say that it's all fluff is so repulsive. How he's in power still in a job where he he has responsibility. I'm sorry for going on, James, but for him
you
to
can have
talk
a
with-
pot kettle if I get cross with you for going on. I didn't take a call for 42 minutes this morning. For heaven's sake,
But
you go on
so
all you
much
please.
frustration, James, of listen, it doesn't matter whether from a wealthy background or from a poor background. For that man to speak with a plum in his mouth, and I know that his sister talks just like you, James, or just like me, right? And for a pompous so-and-so to be able to say that, I'd love the opportunity for one individual to get in a boxing ring with him and bash him up.
Well, that's not very. We don't want
No,
that,
no,
do we?
Of course we do, James.
No,
and
well, I
you know-
can't, Colin. Come on, you're going to make me carry on talking, and we'll forget about taking any calls. I'll go back to Plan A, and I'll speak uninterrupted until Theo Ushwood comes back into the studio with a cold compress and a bottle of Lucozade. Of course, I know that you're speaking metaphorically, but if you want to see him perhaps in a verbal boxing ring, I believe my last encounter with him is available in all the usual places, including YouTube. And it's particularly interesting, I'm told, because everything he says now has been proved wrong by events. So at the time, I suppose the four-lot tuggers could pretend, because he uses the voice that you describe, and people are conditioned in this country to think that is somehow an indication of quality, or that if you talk that posh that you must be clever. The whole class system is built on that idea, really. But of course, you can't now really make any case for claiming that there wouldn't be any problems in Northern Ireland, or that food would be getting cheaper as a consequence of Brexit. They were lies back then, and they're still lies now. It's just that events have caught up with the calumnies. Colin, thank you. Apologies to anybody offended by the prospect of Jacob Rees-Mogg being forced into a boxing ring by a sort of random pugilist. I'm sure it was meant in jest. 10:46 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. More clips, more calls, more alliterations after this. 10:49 is the time, and the world is waiting for Sue Gray's report, which Boris Johnson is currently reading. Again, hard to know quite where to pick this stuff up, but in the spirit of Sam Coates and that magnificent performance outside Downing Street yesterday, asking questions of cabinet ministers that every journalist in the country who's lucky enough to get close to them, or unlucky enough to get close to them, should be asking. Great piece in The Guardian by Raphael Baer on why Conservative MPs can't now do the right thing, because and I told you this was going to happen. There's been too many lies. And if you start picking him up on one of them, how are you going to justify or explain the failure to pick him up on any of the others? It is simply the case now that if the Tories sack him for lying, they'd have to say what he lied about. And if you're going to start saying what Boris Johnson has lied about, it would be like pulling a stray thread that unravels the whole shoddy weave. That's Raphael Baer's rather beautiful turn of phrase, and he talks also about how shamelessness is contagious. I sometimes wonder if we took one word from a show that we do together, what word would it be? I think yesterday's word would probably have been contagious. Actually, the corruption is contagious. And then the callousness, the carelessness is contagious as well. Not caring becomes contagious, as you hear from these parties where they started mocking and teasing the custodian who was pointing out that they shouldn't have been having them. So, I mean, there's pessimism among people who can see exactly what is happening, because I think precisely of that point made by Raphael Baer. He's not going to do anything through shame. His shamelessness is contagious, and Conservative MPs who know that he's not fit to stay in office are probably going to leave him in office, because once you start using his lies, once you start bringing his lies into the light, where on earth would that end? So here's another example of a journalist doing their job. This is Beth Rigby at Sky News interviewing the Prime Minister in December of last year, speaking about another event, one that I don't think troubled Sue Gray's scorecard in the end, from December of the previous year, December of 2020, when I'd remind you that we had to attend funerals over Zoom.
Numerous parties have now been recorded or reported about in Number 10 during the lockdown last year, and now it emerges that you hosted a Christmas party quiz with groups of people in various rooms in Number 10 when such things were banned. Have you asked Simon Case to investigate you?
I can tell you once again that I certainly broke no rules.
I can tell you once again that I certainly broke no rules. How are you going to defend that, lads? We would just talk about the cost of living crisis and the war in Ukraine. Would that be okay? Would that be acceptable? Let's 10:52 is the time. I'll tell you what we'll do now, and moving into the next hour. Let's just remind ourselves what our lives were like when they were doing this. Let's remind ourselves what their lives were like while Downing Street was like this.
Lee Kane's leaving do. Can you just tell us what happened at that event?
There was about 30 people, if not more, in a room. Everyone was stood shoulder to shoulder, some people on each other's laps.
People were sitting on each other's laps?
Yes, 1 or 2 people. They were every week. The event invites for Friday press office drinks were just nailed into the diary.
There were actually invites. There was a weekly regular invite to press office drinks on Friday nights.
Yes, Wine Time Fridays. Invites that were in everyone's calendar for every Friday at 4 p.m.
At 4 o'clock in the afternoon was wine time?
Yes.
So to be really clear about this, you and your colleagues felt that you had essentially permission from Boris Johnson to have these events. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because
he was there. He may have just been popping through on the way to his flat because that's what would happen. You know, he wasn't there saying this shouldn't be happening. He wasn't saying, can everyone break up and go home? Can everyone socially distance? Can everyone put masks on? No, he wasn't telling anybody that. He was grabbing a glass for himself. His principal private secretary himself was organising. His staff were organising parties.
Some conflicting reports on whether there will be resignations from less prominent people in Downing Street. I'd suggest not, probably. I don't know. Simon Case would be the most obvious. Robert Peston of ITV suggesting that he is friends say he is an honourable man and therefore he may go. But if they go, doesn't it make Johnson, or are we completely over the rainbow now? So lots of other people, just like Matt Hancock resigned for breaching guidance. Allegra Stratton resigned because she was the conduit through which the existence of parties became available, and her manner and tone were disrespectful. She giggled about it. She had to go. So the idea that other people doing anything remotely honourable would somehow reflect badly upon Boris Johnson has possibly withered and died. I don't know. That could be over. The idea that, well, how can he possibly stay when those people over there have resigned for much less? Doesn't matter. Doff, cat, tug, forelock. This is a good one. This is a bit of a zinger.
What I can tell you is that all the guidelines were observed, continue to be observed, and what I can also tell you is that we're getting on with the job as we have been throughout, of dealing with the priorities of the people, particularly fighting crime.
So was it a party where the guidelines were followed, or was it not a party?
I can tell you that the guidelines were followed at all times.
Well, did you investigate that yourself? Have you satisfied yourself that that is the case?
I have satisfied myself that the guidelines were followed at all times.
10:55 is the time. That's a BBC journalist finding a little bit of courage, of course, under constant and absolutely outrageous attack from elected politicians who object to the freedom of the press and the exercise of proper journalism. And the simple question now, I think, of what were you doing while they were doing that? And I'll remind you of one thing. This is, if you take a line away from today's programme, as events begin to emerge and details begin to emerge, this is the line I want you to keep in the back of your mind all day, all right? They weren't sorry when you didn't know. They were not sorry when you didn't know. And then you can add, if you want, and they're not sorry now. They're just sorry that you do know. Barry's in Gosport. Barry, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for your programme. It's so good.
Cheers.
But my story probably isn't as important as loads you get on. But I just wanted to say...
It is to you. It is to you and yours, Barry. That's the point, isn't it?
It is. I just want to pick up on your last caller talking about fluff, the mogster talking about fluff. Last April, on my birthday, I was diagnosed with aggressive cancer of the prostate. Almost the worst you get, 9 out of 10 it was. Oof. So they got me into hospital quickly. I'm the biggest coward going when you go to hospital. I'm terrible. And my wife had to leave me at the door. I couldn't have anyone in there. I couldn't see my boys. And when you hear Rees-Mogg talking about the fluff. He doesn't know how insulting it is to the rest of the population who've been through any kind of bereavement or tragedy. And I know you say the longer stuff goes on, the more diluted your anger becomes.
Yes.
I agree with you. But then each time one of them denies the truth or makes disguises about what's happened,
Yes.
then it all just comes back just as not bitter, because you can't stay bitter all the time.
No, you can't.
But and I just want to say that I voted for Boris Johnson. I didn't want Corbyn in. It's the only time I voted for Conservative, and I regret that. I admit I voted for Brexit. I believed all the lies. I would not do that again. But I know
Don't beat yourself up about that. How do you deal? Because it was bad enough hearing Jacob Rees-Mogg describe concerns about the parties they were having while you couldn't take your own wife in to see the cancer doctor as fluff. But how now do you process the knowledge that they were partying like it was going out of fashion, 4 p.m. every Friday with the Prime Minister often in attendance?
It just disgusts me, and it disgusts me the way they've actually lied about it, lied. And I hope I'm in a majority of the population who can see that and get rid of him or something.
It doesn't matter what the population think at the moment. All that matters is what Conservative MPs think. They're the only ones with the power to do anything about it. And I think that little window where it looked like they might find some sort of courage to exercise that power has been closed, partly by the job that's been done on Rishi Sunak, which I don't think is a coincidence. The idea that we can't get rid of the current leader if there's no one there to take over, that has been amplified enormously by the mysterious leaking of information regarding Rishi Sunak's wife's tax status and other little stories that have come out. How are you doing now? How are you doing now, Barry?
Yeah, I'm much better. Yeah, I'm almost in full. I'm in recovery, but great. Yeah, and I just wanted to phone you. I listen every day. Myself, my wife listen every day. Someone at least tells the truth.
Well, I try.
By the way, I hate to sound like a sycophant. I enjoyed your first book. I've just got your second one. So
it's a bit late now after those votes you cast in 2016 and 2000, but better late than never. You don't sound like a sycophant. You sound like a satisfied reader, which is music to my ears. Thank you, Barry. That's it, isn't it? That's what they're banking on. That's the bit that's the weird calculation of this for all me. Because we launched a charity on Friday night for the friend that we lost in December of 2020. And I remember a maximum of 30, I think it was, at the funeral. I think it had gone up from the 12. And there were 400 people at the memorial that we had on Friday night. That's what his boys should have seen. 400 people. Not 30, because we obeyed the rules. And yet the people who made the rules seem to have been breaking them pretty much every day. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the astonishing sort of culmination of one of the ugliest periods in British politics is almost upon us. And of course, as we've said many, many times, the longer the delays, the longer he manages to kick that can down the road, then the less problematic the can becomes when he finally has to pick it up. And today Boris Johnson has to pick it up. He has to pick up responsibility for the parties that were thrown in Downing Street while the rest of us were unable on occasions even to attend funerals. He has to pick up responsibility for the fact that he swore to the House of Commons that there were no parties. He has to pick up responsibility for the fact that he moved from claiming that there were no parties to admitting that there were parties, but insisting that he'd never attended them. He has to today pick up responsibility for the fact that it then emerged he had attended them, to which he offered up the absolutely pant-wettingly pathetic claim that he hadn't realised they were parties. I refer you back to yesterday's photographs that looked like a branch of threshers had been raided. There were so many bottles in shop, but he had no idea it was a party. He had no idea when he was at Lee Kane's leaving party that he was at a party. And that's where we are now. And that's why, perhaps pessimistically and hopefully wrongly, I just think they'll lurch out of this one as well, because there's not a single person, it would seem. Well, that's not true. There are a couple. There are not enough people, there are not 50 people in the Conservative Party with enough courage to call out corruption at the very heart of government. And what is astonishing about that is, look, some of them are just obviously appalling individuals. I goodness knows why, but you know, you look at someone like George Eustice, who you heard talking there, and you just wonder how the hell British politics ever found a home for somebody like that. A former UKIP politician is now a cabinet minister. That tells you everything about the direction of traffic in this country over the last 10 years. But a lot of them, they didn't go. You've just got to presume that they didn't go into politics for this. Yeah, some of them just did it for vanity, obviously, more than we realise. And this will be true on all sides of the House. Some of them did it because they have an enhanced sense of their own importance. Quite a few of them did it. They're the ones I sort of note most closely because their media careers had failed or their attempts to achieve renown or fame or celebrity in other areas of life had come to nothing. But lots of them, you have to presume, went into politics to improve things. Maybe not for everybody, maybe not for the people that most need their lives improving. Maybe they truly subscribe to an ideology that says you've really got to let businesses do whatever the hell they want and then the wealth would trickle down to everybody else. I think they're wrong, but if they truly believed it, you have to have a modicum of respect, don't you, for their sincerity, for their integrity. What did you go into Parliament to do? I went into to cut taxes. All right, I think you're a bit of a vampire, but I respect your honesty, I respect your sincerity. And what have you ended up doing as a Conservative MP? What have you ended up doing as a Conservative MP? You have ended up essentially dedicating your career, your reputation, your sense of self, your professional status to defending a man who is a serial, proven liar and lawbreaker. It's incredible. What's the payoff? What's the payoff? I do not know. But I do know this. I do know that as we learn more and more and more and more about what Downing Street was like at the time, I want to hear from you about what your life was like at the time. It's 8 minutes after 11. I'm throwing open the phone lines actually officially now for the first time in the programme, which I think is a record at 8 minutes after 11. I just want a reminder, because I was reminded of my friend's funeral on Friday. I was reminded of when we gathered in a crematorium in Surrey with most of the pews. Are they still pews if they're in a crematorium, or are they just mere benches? I don't know, but they were empty. And I hated it. I hated it. I will never know for as long as I live how I got through the eulogy with his 2 little boys sitting in the front row and 6 empty roads behind them, when that man's passing should have been marked by an absolute avalanche of humanity coming in to remember him and to pay tribute to him. And we did that belatedly on Friday night, but the reminder of the watered down farewell that we had to give to one of the finest men I'll ever know. And that is my memory, which, my goodness me, compared to some of yours, is not even going to register, is it, in the scale of suffering? The fact that I couldn't say a proper farewell, or we couldn't give a proper send-off to someone that I loved, it's not up there, really, with not being able to see someone in their final days, not being able to visit mum in a care home, not being able to hug my mum. And when I first saw her after lockdown, or as lockdown began to be eased, and we stood across from each other in a pub car park, and she said, "I thought I might have seen you for the last time, son. I thought I might have seen you for the last time." My mum. And that is tiny in the great scheme of things. Nobody died. Nobody got hurt. That's just me and my mum. And that little pain, that suffering, that moment, that poignant moment, all of that being done while they were having parties, while they were sitting on each other's knees and bringing suitcases full of wine into Downing Street. It is... I'm not surprised by anything anymore. After Brexit, I know it's a bit of a stuck record for me, but after Brexit, I came to understand that people can be made to believe anything. I thought that sort of stuff only went on in, tin pot republics or places like North Korea or Nazi Germany, but it happens in America. You've still got a man who was president until quite recently claiming that he won the last election when he just didn't. I mean, it's not a matter of opinion, or he just didn't. He's lying from the highest office in the world. So to see people in this country persuaded to believe things that are categorically untrue, that harm them and render them self-deceivers, force them to lie to themselves, it doesn't shock me anymore. I don't get it. I wonder if I ever will. It doesn't shock me anymore. But it is incredible to see people trying to pretend it doesn't matter. For me, my mum in a car park, my friend in a crematorium, not even going to make the top 1,000 examples of suffering undertaken because we were doing the right thing and obeying the laws and the guidance. And then the building where the laws were made has become the building where the most laws were broken during this whole sorry period. So, listen, unfortunately the texts have dried up, but start sending me more texts about how it's only cake and I'm a miserable lefty. Start giving me more evidence of how hard you work to lie to yourself on a day like today, because the truth is out there. You just can't handle it. The truth is, he's every bit as bad as people like me told you. He's every bit as bad. He's not like, oh, well, I think you exaggerated it, but he's worse, possibly. He's worse than we feared. The idea that he'd be in charge of a global pandemic, he'd be in charge of our national response to a global pandemic, and he'd do the things he did, is actually beyond belief, isn't it? If someone had told you that in advance, even if you were a critic of his, if someone had told you in advance that he'd ride roughshod over the rules he made and treat with contempt the guidance that we followed, you'd have thought that was an exact. You say, oh, but okay, he might have occasionally had the odd after 8 mint when he shouldn't have done, or he might have. But the idea that they were having parties every Friday at 4 o'clock in his house, in his home, and he'd pop in for a knees up and a quick livener, a quick scoop, a quick sharpener. It's beyond, it beggars belief. So I think the right thing to do now would be to accept a few reminders of what the rest of us were doing while they were having Friday wine time. Every bloody Friday. Natasha's in Ruislip. Natasha, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. I called a couple of months ago, actually, similar reason. I lost one of my best friends in the midst of COVID. It wasn't COVID that took her, although she did contract COVID while she was in hospital. We basically, in the February, she was hospitalised. She was 44. This incredible, our Irish queen, we used to call her, vivacious, up for a party. You know, Kate was always one of those. I've only just started talking about her in past tense, actually, and it's been 2 years.
It's funny that, isn't it? You notice yourself doing it.
Yeah, 2 young children, and she was hospitalised from the February until, I think, the July, and we couldn't go and see her. I think I saw her once, and then it was video calls. We knew that we were losing her. To this day, like I said, we don't know what took her in the end. And I guess the catalyst was, it was compounded by the fact that she was such a vivacious party organizer. Everyone loved Kate. Everyone, typical Irish, amazing, incredible woman.
And you couldn't have a party.
No, and there were 12 of us. There were 12 of us sat in this real sedate environment, and I know Kate, and that's not what she would have wanted. It was almost like add insult to injury to this incredible woman who is larger than life and in so many ways. And it absolutely crushes me. It crushes me, the fact that it's almost like out of sight, out of mind.
We did the right thing. We did the right thing by obeying the rules, by obeying the guidance. But the fact that they were doing the wrong thing every Friday and on other days as well, it's actually it's my job to put it into words, Natasha, not yours. But it is quite hard properly to convey, because you can't regret doing the right thing. It's the insult, isn't it? Like you say, it's the adding of the insult. So the injury is the diluted, denuded send-off. The injury is the absence of a proper party or a proper wake. That's an injury you had to sustain because of COVID and because of the guidelines. But you're right, it's the insult they added to injury every Friday that is almost impossible to understand.
It's like losing her again every time.
Is it really?
Yeah, it really is.
Crikey.
Every time I hear on the news or anything on the radio about this Partygate, and I think that almost kind of dilutes the seriousness of it. It wasn't Partygate; it was criminal, and
Yeah. Well, that's part. I mean, they stick a gate on the end of everything these days, so I don't know if that was actually. I don't know if that was actually deliberate, but it does. Yeah, I mean, it does add to that ludicrous narrative that they tried to punt originally, that it's only cake and it doesn't matter. The Daily Mail, don't they know there's a war on? And then 2 weeks of talking about Keir Starmer. The hypocrisy is almost beyond analysis now. It's almost beyond description. It's the point where everybody knows the emperor is naked, but the Praetorian Guard and 80% of the country's media are still claiming that he's wearing beautiful robes. Everyone else is just sitting there, well, what more proof do you need? You can see his buttocks quivering in front of us, but here we are still doing it. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you going to have a party for Kate at some point? Have you had one now that you're allowed to? Are you going to try and have a bit of a get-together?
It's a bit of not awkward one. It's, you never know. We weren't related, but I'd love to.
It's not your call. I see what. No,
Yeah.
I see what you mean. Sorry, I hijacked you a bit with that question. 11:16 is the time. It is 19 minutes after 11. I opened the show today by telling you what would happen later, but maybe in a little more detail on that. I mean, it's a prediction. The Sue Gray report will reveal a culture of complete contempt for the rules, and also, we learned last night, for the people trying to enforce the rules within Downing Street, a culture inculcated by the man at the very top of the command chain, Boris Johnson, who would attend these parties and indeed give speeches at them while somehow remaining unaware that there were actually parties. A man responsible for telling the rest of the country, writing to 12-year-old girls to praise them for not having a birthday party while he had one himself. And leaving dues, which are not work gatherings by any stretch of the imagination. But of course, that's the stretch that people will have to take a little later today. But then you're going to get the apologies. And obviously, I don't want you to watch it on television because I want you to listen to it on LBC. And we're going to start getting the first of the apologies at 12:30 after PMQs has finished. Just look for the smirk. Look for the deceiver's smirk around the corner of his mouth. You see it with Priti Patel as well. They just can't help it. They can't help that little self-congratulation on, oh, I'm getting away with this as well. So just look out for that. That's always interesting when you're watching the clips later on the later news. But remember this as well, that he's not sorry. And I can prove to you that he's not sorry. I can prove to you in the simplest, clearest fashion that he is not sorry. He was not sorry when you didn't know. He is only sorry that you do know. And as this clip demonstrates, and you've heard it many, many times, as this clip demonstrates, when he claimed he was sorry, he already knew about the things that had happened. That's the incredible thing. When he claimed he was sickened, he already knew because he'd been at comparable parties. They happened every Friday. So when he said this in the House of Commons last December, he knew what had been going on. He knew everything that's going to come out in Sue Gray's report today. He already knew because he was either in the room where it happened, or he was upstairs, or walking past, or in the email chain, or being told about it, because it's his home where most of this unfolded, his actual home. The gulf between reality and a claim that he could have been in any way unaware is absolutely epic. So when he stands up and says sorry later today, what he says sorry for, I can't quite predict, because I don't think he can say sorry for lying. He'll still claim he didn't realise it was a party, or he was assured that guy. I don't know, actually. I don't want to second guess that. That's why he gets away with it, isn't it? Because those of us who can see clearly what's going on, we still cling to the notion that eventually he'll have to do what we would do in this situation. Even if we did it reluctantly, we'd have to admit the game was up. At some point, you'd have to just go, oh, look. It's a bit like when you're watching footage of criminals being investigated by the police, and they're denying it and denying it and denying it, and no commenting and no commenting and no commenting, and lying and lying and lying. And then finally, and the police will tell you that they can smell it in the room, when you finally go, all right, I did it. I'll tell you where her body is. They get relief. The criminal holding it in has relief. Some people don't have that capacity. Some people don't have any sense of relief when they tell that. Some people are so psychologically skewed that they lie so easily it doesn't build up pressure inside them. They lie so casually, so completely, that there's no sense of conscience screaming inside them. So Boris Johnson will apologise in a way later today that is designed to help him avoid as much responsibility as he can reasonably avoid. There will be no moment where he does a John Profumo and walks away forever and dedicates the rest of his life to working with the homeless. There will be no moment where he... Do you know what Brooks Newmark was doing last week? A Conservative MP who resigned in shame after being caught in a sting with a male journalist pretending to be a female. He helped evacuate 8,000 Ukrainians last week. No fanfare. Only know about it because he happened to bump into a journalist while he was there. And there's not going to be any of that. There's not going to be any attempt to atone. There's not going to be any attempt to he's going to carry on, and he's going to try and lie his way out of it again by apologising when he doesn't mean it. And how do we know he doesn't mean it? Well, I mean, you could start the list now, but here is a pretty compelling piece of evidence.
Mr. Speaker, I think the right honourable gentleman probably missed what I said at the beginning, but I apologise. I apologise for the impression that has been given that staff in Downing Street take this less than seriously. I'm sickened myself and furious about that.
So Friday night wine, which he was regularly at, leaving parties at which he gave speeches, a gathering which left his son's garden swing broken, all of that already known to him when he claimed he was sickened and furious by the suggestion that Downing Street staff didn't take the rules seriously. All of it, everything you find out today, was either known to him or known to his closest advisors. Every single syllable of scandal that will be contained in the Sue Gray report was already known to Boris Johnson and or his closest advisors. And yet back in December of last year, he could stand up in the House of Commons and claim to be sickened and furious by the possibility that Downing Street staff weren't taking the rules and guidance as seriously as the rest of the country. That, even by the standards of Boris Johnson, that lie right there might be the biggest one ever. Obviously, I'm just talking about politics, not his marriages or his relationships with his employers or voters or constituents. I'm just talking about his relationship with Parliament. That one right there, I was sickened and furious to discover that there was a light-hearted conversation about a party when he knew inside, when he said that outside, he knew inside he'd been to them. He'd been there. He'd seen it. That's incredible, right? That's not supposed to happen. I know this sounds a bit arrogant and exceptionalist in a patriotic sense. That's not supposed to happen in this country. And it is. And they are queuing up now. They're doing that. They're flexing. The George Eustaces, the Nadeem Zahawis, the Grant Shapses. They're in the gym of mental gymnastics now, getting ready to come out and claim that black is white, that down is up, and that the moon is made of cheese. And all in service of a man who's done nothing to deserve their support and their defence, except win a referendum by lying and win a general election by lying again. Wow. 26 minutes after 11. Philip is in Greenwich. Philip, sorry to keep you. What were you doing when they were partying?
I work for the fire service. I was working, basically. I was doing my job. Nothing more, nothing less. Well, we were doing more. This man sickens me. What he has done what he's allowed, everything he has done. Yeah. It's everything he does, he touches. I mean, and he's been so lucky. You know, every time he tells a lie or does something in the world happens in his favour to keep him there. I just don't get it. You know, if I was to turn up at to work, and we were to, for example, off duty, return to work with a suitcase full of booze, we would be sacked.
Yeah.
I mean, we would be sacked. Well,
yeah, but you only. I mean, let's be clear. You only run into burning buildings in the hope of pulling out people while they're still alive. It's not as if you've got an important job, Philip.
No, not at all. No. If I had to make decisions on how to run a country, alcohol would be banned.
Yeah.
From how?
I hadn't even thought about what they might have had to do if there was an emergency and they were all half cut.
Exactly, and to endorse, the man in charge of our country to endorse alcohol. Don't get me wrong, I like a drink,
of course,
but
there's a time and a place, Philip. There's a time.
Of course, I mean, the rest of the country, you're telling them not to do, and you're doing, and it's not. I'm not saying that. It's the thing I'm really angry about is the lying to Parliament, lying to the British people, lying to the honest British people. This man
and oddly, I'm also angry about the people who are lying to themselves. I'm not angry with them. That's why I read out some of their texts when they come in. I'm not angry with them. I'm not going to be inviting them around for tea anytime soon, but I'm angry with Boris Johnson for turning these people into people who now lie to themselves.
Oh, the thing about me, I'm not Conservative. I don't vote Conservative.
Sure.
But the man himself, everything he's touched, even the Northern Ireland Protocol, to get his Brexit through. And I was watching this at the time thinking, what is he doing? I mean, and I understand people voted for him, and wanted Brexit done and thought he was the best thing. But they've got to wake up and go, do you know what? Maybe not.
Yeah, but they love your liberal tears, Philip.
Yeah, most probably they do. But I mean, even if I did vote Conservative, you'd look to he's not the man for the job, is he?
It's not for you and me to say. It's for the Conservative MPs who, as Theo explained earlier this morning, will be motivated as much by the knowledge that there's nobody waiting in the wings to take over as they are by the knowledge that he won those two votes that you describe. He won a general election. He won the Brexit referendum by lying through his teeth, as is now almost impossible to deny. Well, it is impossible to deny with reference to Northern Ireland. No one can pretend that wasn't a huge lie. But also, of course, the bigger Brexit balloon, and I guess maybe if they call him out for this, then that balloon pops. 11:30 is the time. Hold on to your hats, folks. The report has dropped. Theo's got a copy. He will be joining us after the news, as will my LBC colleague Andrew Marr, who will be picking up the baton later this evening to continue discussions about what must rank among the most remarkable political stories of even his career with a ringside seat. It is coming up to 11:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Holly Harris is here now with your headlines.